Welcome back to Midnight Affair Tales. Thank you for joining us. The house was silent. Too silent. Jackson lively stepped through the front door, the weight of exhaustion dragging at his limbs. His flight had landed 2 hours early. He hadn't told Marissa. He wanted to surprise her. Instead, she had surprised him. The moment he stepped into the hallway, he knew something was wrong. The air felt different, tainted. A faint trace of cologne that didn't belong to him clung to the walls. Then he heard it. A soft, breathy laugh. A sound he hadn't heard from her in years. His heart didn't race. His stomach didn't drop. There was no fiery explosion of rage. Instead, a terrifying calm settled over him. He moved slowly, deliberately, following the sound up the stairs, past the photos of their life together. The wedding, the anniversaries, the memories that were now nothing but a carefully crafted lie. His bedroom door was open just an inch. Enough to see. Marissa lay sprawled across their bed, tangled with another man. The sheets they had once made love on were now drenched in the sweat of betrayal. The scent of her perfume mixed with something foreign, something filthy. Jackson's fingers curled into a fist, nails digging into his palm. But he didn't walk in. He didn't scream. He simply watched. Watched how she moved. Watched how she laughed. Watched how she looked at him, the way she used to look at Jackson. The realization was chilling. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't guilt-ridden or shameful. This was routine. A cold, steady numbness spread through him as he stepped back, silent as a shadow. He didn't slam the door. He didn't make his presence known. Instead, he walked out. Not just out of the room. Not just out of the house. Out of her life. By the time she realized what he had done, it would already be too late. Marissa woke up to an empty bed. She stretched lazily, her body still humming from the night before. A smirk pulled at her lips as she glanced at the clock. 9:42 a.m. Jackson was probably out for a run. He was predictable like that. She rolled onto her back, sighing. Last night had been exhilarating. Liam had always known exactly how to make her feel alive, something Jackson hadn't managed in years. She reached for her phone. No messages. Her smirk faded. She scrolled through her notifications. Nothing from Jackson. Weird. She sat up, glancing toward the bathroom. The door was open. The light off. No signs of him. A flicker of unease stirred in her stomach. She padded downstairs, expecting the smell of fresh coffee, expecting to hear the familiar clink of dishes. Nothing. The house was eerily quiet. Jackson? Her voice echoed against the walls. No answer. She checked the garage. His car was gone. He hadn't left a note. No text. No explanation. Her fingers tightened around her phone as she called him. Straight to voicemail. A cold feeling slithered through her chest. She called again. Still nothing. She tried his office. His assistant answered. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Lively, but Jackson is no longer employed with us." Marissa nearly dropped the phone. What? His resignation was processed a week ago. Her breath came in short gasps. That wasn't possible. He hadn't told her anything. Her stomach twisted violently. She checked their bank accounts. Access denied. She tried again. Error. She switched to her credit cards. Declined. Her vision blurred. Jackson had locked her out of everything. She sat on the couch, her hands shaking. Then her phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. She swallowed hard and tapped it open. "You never really knew me, did you?" A shiver crawled down her spine. She had lost him. But now, for the first time, she wondered, what else had she lost? Marissa's breath came in ragged gasps as she read the message again. Unknown number. "You never really knew me, did you?" She tried to call Jackson. The number had been disconnected. Panic surged through her veins as she rushed upstairs. She threw open the closet doors. His side was empty. Her breath hitched. The watch he always wore? Gone. His work bag? Gone. She ran to the dresser, yanking open the drawers. Nothing. She stumbled back, gripping the edge of the bed for support. Jackson had erased himself. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Unknown number. Check your accounts. Check your life. How much of it was ever yours? Marissa fumbled to open her banking app again, her fingers shaking. The numbers were wrong. Everything was gone. She checked the mortgage records. Not in her name. She checked the deed to the house. Not in her name. Her breath came in short, frantic gasps. She had thought this house was hers, that their life, their wealth belonged to both of them. But Jackson had planned every detail, and she had never seen it coming. Her phone rang. She nearly dropped it. Liam. She answered immediately. Liam. Something's wrong. Jackson's. Marissa. His voice was cold. Tense. Different. She froze. What's going on? There was silence on the other end. Then Liam spoke. He knows. Her entire body went numb. What? She whispered. Jackson, Liam said. He knows everything. Marissa couldn't breathe. Liam exhaled shakily. You don't understand, Marissa? I think he's coming for us. Her pulse pounded in her ears. He's not that kind of person, Liam. He wouldn't. Are you sure? Liam cut in. His voice was hoarse. Because I just got a call from my boss. Marissa clutched the phone tighter. What? Liam's voice dropped to a whisper. I don't have a job anymore. Her blood ran cold. Her grip on reality started slipping. This wasn't just Jackson leaving. This was Jackson taking everything away, piece by piece. And the worst part? She had no idea how far he would go. Marissa sat frozen, Liam's words ringing in her ears. I don't have a job anymore. Her grip tightened around the phone. Liam, what are you talking about? A sharp breath came from the other end. I walked into work this morning. Security was waiting for me. I was fired on the spot. No warning, no explanation. That doesn't make sense, she whispered, her stomach twisting. Oh, it makes perfect sense, Liam snapped. Jackson did this. Marissa swallowed hard. How would he even? Wake up, Marissa. He's been planning this. He's not just leaving you. He's destroying everything connected to you. Her hands shook as she pressed a palm against her forehead. No, this couldn't be happening. But it was. Jackson had resigned from his own job a week ago. He had drained their accounts. He had erased himself. And now he was erasing Liam. Marissa struggled to steady her breathing. We have to find him. No, Liam said sharply. I have to fix my own damn life. You're on your own. The call disconnected. A lump formed in her throat as she lowered the phone. Alone. She was completely alone. Another vibration. A new message. A no number. You built your world on lies. And now, I'm burning it down. Marissa's vision blurred. She wasn't just losing Jackson. She was losing everything. Marissa's hands trembled as she tried logging into her accounts again. Access denied. She tried her credit cards. Declined. Her heart pounded. She grabbed her laptop, searching for her name in the property records. Nothing. The house she was standing in, Jackson's house, was never legally hers. Her stomach turned violently as she stumbled back. How had she never noticed? How had she let him handle everything while she indulged in a fantasy that she was untouchable? She tried her driver's license renewal. Rejected. Her gym membership. Cancelled. Her name, her existence, was vanishing in real time. She turned to the one thing Jackson hadn't locked her out of, her emails. Her fingers moved frantically as she typed his name, searching for anything. A clue. A mistake. One email stood out. Sent 2 weeks ago. From Jackson Lively. To himself. Marissa's heart pounded as she clicked it open. It was a list. A detailed plan. Phase 1, disappear. Phase 2, cut all ties. Phase 3, take back what's mine. Phase 4, make sure she understands what loss feels like. Phase 5, let her live in what she created. A lump formed in her throat. She scrolled further, hands shaking. There was one last note at the bottom. This isn't revenge. This is balance. Marissa let the laptop slip from her fingers. Jackson hadn't just left her. He had made her disappear too. A sharp knock at the door made Marissa jolt. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she moved toward it, dread curling in her stomach. She peeked through the peephole. A man in a black suit stood on the other side, holding an envelope. She hesitated. Another knock, harder this time. With a deep breath, she unlocked the door and cracked it open. Yes. Marissa Lively? The man asked in a professional tone. Yes, she said slowly. He extended the envelope. You've been served. Her hands shook as she took it. What? But the man had already turned, walking back to his car without another word. She stared at the envelope like it might catch fire in her hands. Her throat tightened as she ripped it open. Divorce papers. Her pulse roared in her ears. This wasn't just a request to dissolve their marriage. Jackson had filed with full claims to every asset. The house, the cars, the investments, everything. And she had no legal ground to fight it. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she flipped through the final page. A handwritten note. Consider this the first cut. There are more to come. Marissa's knees buckled. This wasn't divorce. This was a slow, methodical execution. And Jackson had only just begun. Marissa sat on the cold marble floor, her back pressed against the front door, the divorce papers clutched in her trembling hands. Her mind screamed at her to think, to act, to do something. But she couldn't move. Jackson had planned everything down to the last detail. Every account locked. Every asset gone. Even their house, his house. And now he had made the first legal move. Divorce was just the beginning. Her hands clenched into fists. She needed control. Her phone buzzed. She snatched it up, heart racing. A text from Liam. Liam, what the hell did you drag me into? Her stomach dropped. She typed back quickly. Marissa, where are you? What's going on? Liam, I lost my job. My bank accounts are frozen. Someone is watching me. This is not normal, Marissa. Her breath hitched. Watching. Marissa, who's watching you? Liam, I don't know. But I swear to God I feel it. I tried leaving town, but my car got towed before I even made it out of the city. Then my landlord suddenly found a lease violation and kicked me out. This is not a coincidence. Marissa's pulse hammered in her ears. Jackson wasn't just ruining her life. He was erasing Liam too. Another message. Unknown number. You always took things that weren't yours. How does it feel to lose something for once? Marissa's blood turned ice cold. Jackson was out there. Watching. Destroying. And she had no idea how far he would go. By nightfall, the fear had settled deep into Marissa's bones. She had spent the entire day trying to reverse the damage, calling lawyers, searching for financial loopholes, even trying to track Jackson down. Nothing. No legal options. No financial support. No one willing to help her. Even her sister had refused to pick up her calls. Jackson had cut her off from everything. She sat on the couch, phone in hand, staring at the blank television screen. Her thoughts swirled, frantic and chaotic. A noise outside made her jolt. A car engine. Slow. Too slow. She crept to the window, her breath shallow. The headlights moved past her house, barely visible through the curtains. But something was off. The car wasn't leaving. It was circling. Her fingers curled tighter around her phone. She stepped back from the window, her skin crawling. Another text came in. Unknown number. Still comfortable in that house? Her breath hitched. She spun around, scanning the dimly lit room. Her skin prickled with the sense that someone, somewhere, was watching. She grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter, her grip slick with sweat. She moved through the house, checking every door, every window. Locked. Secure. But that didn't matter. Jackson didn't need to break in. He was already inside her head. Marissa didn't sleep. She spent the night on the couch, gripping the knife, her body wired with exhaustion. Every creak of the house felt like a warning. By morning, her nerves were shredded. She needed to get out. She grabbed her purse, one of the few things she still owned, and rushed out the door. The sun was rising, the street quiet. Too quiet. Her car was still dead. She needed a ride. She pulled out her phone and tried to order a rideshare. Transaction declined. Damn it, she hissed, heart hammering. She marched down the sidewalk, determined to flag down a cab if she had to. Then she saw it. A black car. Parked across the street. Unmoving. Her pulse pounded. The windows were tinted, the engine running. A strange sensation crawled over her skin. She turned away, quickening her pace. A second car, black, identical, turned the corner ahead of her. Her stomach clenched. She wasn't imagining it. She was being followed. She picked up speed, practically jogging. The second car slowed. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, go ahead. Try to run. I'll still be watching. She nearly dropped the phone. A low panic settled in. She wasn't just trapped financially. She was being hunted. Jackson wasn't just taking her life apart. He was closing in. Marissa barely made it back inside before her legs gave out beneath her. She collapsed against the door, slamming it shut, her breath ragged. She was being followed. Watched. Jackson was out there, somewhere, pulling the strings. Her hands shook as she checked her phone again, but no new messages came through. That was worse. The waiting. The silence. She forced herself to think. She needed help. Her fingers dialed Liam's number. He was the only one left. Voicemail. She tried again. Straight to voicemail. A sharp knock at the door made her jump. She spun toward it, heart hammering. Not Jackson. Not Liam. A courier. Through the peephole, she saw him standing there in a dark uniform, holding an envelope. She hesitated, then slowly opened the door. Marissa Lively? The man asked. Her mouth felt dry. Yes. The courier handed her the envelope, nodded, and walked away. Her fingers trembled as she ripped it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Her eyes scanned the first line and her stomach dropped. Eviction notice. Her name wasn't on the lease. Jackson had full ownership of the house. She had 1 week to vacate. Marissa's hands clenched into fists. She had cheated. She had lied. But Jackson? Jackson was erasing her existence. Marissa paced the living room, the eviction notice clutched in her hand. Her mind raced. Jackson was shutting her down piece by piece. He had taken her money. Frozen her accounts. He had taken Liam's job. Destroyed his life. Now he was taking her home. Her fingers gripped the edge of the couch. She wouldn't let him win. She dialed her lawyer, one of the best divorce attorneys in town. She still had a chance to fight this. The call rang. Then a voice answered. Marissa. She exhaled in relief. Daniel, thank God. I need your... I can't represent you. Her breath caught. What? Why? A heavy silence. Then in a low voice he said, Jackson already called me. He retained me first. I'm legally barred from taking your case. Marissa's vision blurred. No. Daniel, please. There has to be. He's not just divorcing you, Marissa. He's making sure no one helps you. The line went dead. The phone slipped from her fingers. Jackson had outplayed her again. A text buzzed. Unknown number, it's only fair, don't you think? Marissa's pulse pounded in her ears. She needed to leave. But where? She had nowhere to go. The next morning the knock on the door was loud. Too loud. Marissa jolted awake on the couch, her head pounding. When she opened the door, she expected another legal notice. Instead, she found Rachel Bennett, Liam's wife. The woman's face was stone cold, her eyes burning with fury. Marissa barely had time to react before Rachel's palm cracked across her cheek. The slap was hard. Sure. You ruined my life, Rachel spat. Marissa clutched her stinging cheek. Rachel, wait. Rachel threw an envelope at her. You want to know where Liam is? Her voice was shaking. He ran. The second your husband exposed you both, he packed up and disappeared. Marissa's chest tightened. What are you talking about? Rachel's lip curled in disgust. Liam left me. I got divorce papers this morning. Marissa's stomach dropped. Liam left? Without a word? Without telling her? She fumbled to grab the papers. Liam had signed everything away. At the very back of the pile, there was a handwritten note. You were never worth losing everything for. Marissa staggered back. Liam hadn't just left Rachel. He had left Marissa too. Rachel's voice was full of venom. You destroyed my family. And now, you have no one left. She turned and walked away. Marissa stood in the open doorway, numb. She had thought she had Jackson wrapped around her finger. She had thought she could have Liam and everything else. Now, she had nothing. And Jackson wasn't even finished yet. Marissa sat on the floor, the divorce papers and eviction notice scattered around her. Liam was gone. Rachel hated her. Jackson had taken everything. She had nowhere to go. She clenched her fists. This wasn't over. She needed answers. She needed to find Jackson. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number, don't look for me. Her breath hitched. He knew. She gritted her teeth and typed back. Marissa, where are you? We need to talk. No response. She stood up, wiping at her face. She refused to let him win. She grabbed her purse and stormed out. She would find Jackson the old-fashioned way. Through his past. If he had erased himself from their life, she had to go somewhere he couldn't erase. His mother's house. As she pulled up outside Linda Lively's quiet suburban home, her pulse pounded. She hadn't spoken to Linda in weeks. Jackson must have told her everything by now. Marissa hesitated before ringing the doorbell. The door creaked open. Linda's face twisted in disgust the moment she saw her. "I told you never to come here." Marissa swallowed hard. "Linda, please. I need to find Jackson." Linda's eyes narrowed. "Why?" Marissa bit her lip. "Because he's destroying me." A dry, humorless laugh escaped Linda's lips. "Oh, honey. You did that to yourself." Marissa stiffened. "I didn't think." "No, you didn't think," Linda cut in, her voice sharp. "You thought Jackson was weak. But you never saw who he really was." Marissa's stomach twisted. "What does that mean?" Linda leaned in slightly. "It means," she said quietly, "you should stop looking for him." Marissa's blood ran cold. Before she could speak, Linda slammed the door in her face. Marissa drove back in silence, Linda's words ringing in her head. "You never saw who he really was." Who was Jackson? The man she married had been calm, quiet, reserved. But this was something else. Her thoughts swirled as she pulled into the driveway. She barely noticed the black car parked down the street. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. Everything was wrong. Her shoes weren't by the door where she had left them. The kitchen light was on. She had turned it off. A faint trace of cologne lingered in the air, Jackson's cologne. Her pulse thundered. Someone had been in her house. Her phone buzzed. She fumbled to check the message. "Unknown number. Comfortable in my house?" Her stomach dropped. She spun around, heart hammering. Was he here? Was he inside? She rushed to the front door, the lock clicked. Her breath hitched. The door was locking itself. A whisper of movement came from upstairs. She grabbed a knife from the counter, her fingers slick with sweat. "Jackson?" Her voice came out hoarse. No answer. She crept forward, her knees weak. Every step felt like walking into a trap. The silence stretched. She reached the bottom of the stairs, gripping the banister, when a soft thud from the second floor. Her heart stopped. Someone was up there. Marissa's grip tightened on the knife as she took slow, shaky steps up the stairs. The house felt different. Jackson had been here. Or someone else had. A light was on in the bedroom. Her bedroom. She swallowed her fear and pushed open the door. The bed was made perfectly. The windows were open just slightly. And sitting on the nightstand was something that shouldn't be there. Jackson's wedding ring. Marissa's breath hitched. She took a step closer, hands shaking. Her phone buzzed. "Unknown number. It doesn't feel like home anymore, does it?" A cold sweat broke across her skin. She spun around, knife raised. No one. Her head whipped toward the closet. The door was slightly ajar. Her fingers trembled as she reached out. Bang. A loud crash sounded downstairs. Marissa nearly dropped the knife. She bolted down the stairs, her breath ragged. The front door was wide open. Her chest heaved as she stepped outside onto the porch. The street was empty. She turned back toward the house and froze. Written on the wall, smeared in something dark, were 5 chilling words. "You don't belong here anymore." Marissa stumbled backward, her vision spinning. Jackson had been here. And he had left his message. This wasn't a game. This was a hunt. Marissa stood frozen on the front porch, staring at the words scrawled across the wall. "You don't belong here anymore." Her chest heaved. She stepped back, her pulse roaring in her ears. The message looked like it had been written in mud or... Her stomach twisted. She bolted inside, slamming the door shut behind her, hands shaking as she locked it. Her phone buzzed. "Unknown number. You should have left when you had the chance." Marissa's breath hitched. She spun in circles, scanning the house, the windows, the doors. He was close. Maybe even watching right now. She forced herself to take deep, uneven breaths. Think, Marissa. She had 2 choices, run or fight. She grabbed her purse, yanking open drawers, searching for anything valuable she could take with her. Jewelry. Something. Nothing. She sprinted upstairs to grab her passport, only to find the drawer empty. Her hands trembled as she yanked open another drawer. Gone. Everything she could use to leave had already been taken. Jackson hadn't just been watching. He had been preparing. She wasn't being threatened. She was being trapped. Marissa gripped the edges of the bathroom sink, her knuckles white. Jackson was toying with her, pushing her closer to the edge. She couldn't let him win. She splashed cold water on her face, trying to steady her breathing. When she looked up, a small white envelope was taped to the bathroom mirror. Her stomach twisted. She hadn't seen that before. With shaky hands she peeled it off and opened it. Inside was a single Polaroid. Her hands went ice cold. It was her. Taken from outside the house. From last night. She was sitting on the couch, staring at the eviction notice in shock. Jackson had been here. Watching. Photographing her. Marissa dropped the envelope, her pulse hammering. Her phone vibrated in her hand. A no number. I like that picture. But the next one might be closer. A strangled noise left her throat. Her head snapped toward the windows. The curtains were open. She ran to them, yanking them shut. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She was being hunted. Not just mentally but physically. She had to get out. But she had nowhere to go. Marissa sat curled up on the couch, gripping the knife she had taken from the kitchen. Her entire body trembled. She was being watched. Followed. Jackson wasn't just divorcing her. He was erasing her. She needed help. No. Her mind raced. Who could she call? Her friends had cut her off. Liam was gone. Rachel wanted her dead. Her lawyer wouldn't represent her. Even her own sister refused to answer her calls. She had no one left. She dialed 911. A robotic voice responded. We're sorry. Your call cannot be completed at this time. Her hands clenched. She tried again. Same response. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Jackson had blocked her from emergency services. Oh. She had no answers. No options. A sound outside made her freeze. A car engine. Slow. Too slow. She crawled toward the window, lifting the curtain just a fraction. A black SUV sat parked across the street. The same one from before. A shadow sat in the driver's seat. Not moving. Not leaving. Just watching. Marissa's stomach turned violently. She let the curtain fall and backed away from the window. Jackson had taken everything. Now he was making sure she felt it. She wasn't just trapped. She was being caged. Marissa's breath was shallow as she stepped away from the window. The black SUV outside hadn't moved. She knew someone was in it, watching. Her fingers curled around her phone as she dialed a new number. Her last option. A private investigator. She barely knew him. He was someone Jackson had used years ago for work-related security issues. But right now, he was the only person left who might help. The call rang twice before a deep voice answered. This is Wyatt. Marissa's voice wavered. I need help. Pause. Then, who is this? She swallowed hard. Marissa lively. Silence. Then a sharp exhale. If you're calling me, you're already too late. Marissa stiffened. What does that mean? Wyatt's tone darkened. It means Jackson isn't just cutting you off. He's making sure you can't fight back. Her heart pounded. I don't understand. Wyatt let out a low chuckle, humorless. Then you don't know your husband at all. She gritted her teeth. I need to find him. I need to. No, Wyatt interrupted. You need to disappear. Marissa's pulse stilled. What? You don't get it, do you? Wyatt's voice was laced with something close to pity. You're not playing a game anymore, Marissa. Jackson is. And he never starts something unless he's already won. The line went dead. Marissa stared at her phone, cold fear slithering through her. Outside, the black SUV's headlights flickered once. A warning. She had nowhere to run. Jackson was closing in. Marissa didn't sleep that night. Every sound in the house made her jolt. Every shadow felt like it was moving. Jackson wasn't just making her suffer. He was breaking her piece by piece. By morning, her body was aching from exhaustion, but she forced herself to move. She needed cash. A way out. Her last stash of emergency money was hidden in the garage. Jackson had controlled their accounts, but he didn't know everything. She prayed he didn't know this. She threw on a hoodie and grabbed her car keys. Even though the car was dead, the keys had a compartment where she kept $500 in emergency bills. She stepped into the garage, heart pounding. She reached for the toolbox where she had hidden the cash. It was empty. Her stomach turned. On top of the empty box sat a single folded piece of paper. Marissa's fingers trembled as she picked it up and unfolded it. 4 words. Nice try. Too late. Her knees nearly gave out. He knew. A noise behind her. She spun around. Nothing. Her breath came out in uneven gasps. The walls felt like they were closing in. She stumbled back into the house, slamming the garage door shut, locking it. Her phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number, you should be more careful. You almost ran into me. Marissa's lungs stopped working. He had been there. In the garage. Watching. She pressed a hand to her chest, struggling to breathe. Jackson wasn't just taking her life. He was right behind her. Marissa sat on the floor, hands clenched in her lap, fighting the panic threatening to consume her. She had to think. She had to act. Jackson had taken everything, but there was still one thing she had left. The truth. If she couldn't beat him in the shadows, she'd drag him into the light. Her mind raced. Jackson had always controlled the narrative. His life was built on his calm, respectable image. But what if she exposed him? What if she told the world what he was doing? She grabbed her phone, her fingers moving fast. She logged into her social media. Her accounts had been inactive for weeks, but they weren't locked. She started typing. To everyone who thinks Jackson Lively is the perfect man, think again. He has stolen everything from me. He is hunting me. And if something happens to me, just know, he did it. She hesitated. Her finger hovered over the post button. She exhaled sharply. This was her last card. She tapped post. For a few seconds nothing happened. Then her phone screen glitched. The app shut down. She frowned, reopening it, her post was gone. A new message appeared. Unknown number, that was stupid. Her breath caught. Then another message. Unknown number, you should check the news. Her hands shook as she switched apps, pulling up a news site. The first headline made her blood run cold. Breaking, Marissa Lively under investigation for financial fraud. Her stomach flipped. She clicked on it, her pulse hammering. The article detailed fake business accounts, false tax filings, illegal withdrawals, all under her name. She couldn't breathe. Jackson had set her up. He wasn't just taking her money. He was making sure she'd never get it back. A final message flashed across her screen. Unknown number, you wanted attention? Now you have it. Marissa's vision spun. Jackson had backed her into a corner. And she had just made it worse. Pause here. Dear good listeners. A lot of people listen to the story, but only 9% subscribe. I work hard to bring you amazing stories every day. This time, my goal is to hit 2,000 subscribers this month. So, my awesome audience, show some love. Hit that subscribe button now. And must tell me in the comment section where you are watching my videos. Thanks. Let's continue our story. Marissa's breath came in shallow gasps as she reread the headline. Breaking. Marissa Lively under investigation for financial fraud. Her name. Her photo. Her life. The article laid everything out. False business accounts, embezzled funds, suspicious bank transfers. All things she never did. She staggered backward, the walls closing in around her. Jackson hadn't just destroyed her finances. He was turning her into a criminal. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Unknown number, I warned you not to push me. Marissa clenched her jaw, rage cutting through the fear. He was backing her into a corner. She wouldn't let him win. She scrolled through the article. The case was being led by the FBI. Her stomach churned. The FBI? Jackson had gone all in. He wasn't just ruining her reputation. He was making sure she wouldn't be able to fight back. She needed proof. Her fingers flew across the screen as she tried to access her old emails, her bank history, anything that could prove this was a setup. Access denied. Her jaw tightened. Jackson had wiped her out so completely that even her own past didn't belong to her anymore. Her phone vibrated. A new news alert. Authorities confirmed they will move forward with charges if Marissa Lively does not come forward for questioning. Marissa's stomach dropped. This wasn't just a threat. Jackson had made sure that soon she'd be arrested. Marissa moved fast, throwing essentials into a bag. She had no choice. She couldn't fight this. She couldn't run to anyone. The only option left was to disappear. She threw on a hoodie and slid on sunglasses, forcing herself to breathe. She grabbed what little cash she had left, barely a few $100s, and stuffed it into her pocket. She had to get out of town. She yanked open the door and froze. A police car was parked down the street. Her throat closed. No, not yet. She turned sharply, slipping out the back door instead, keeping low as she hurried toward the alley behind the house. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. She couldn't afford another message. Not right now. She reached the main street and hailed a cab. The driver barely glanced at her as she slid into the back seat. Where to? She swallowed hard. The bus station. The driver nodded and pulled away from the curb. Her hands trembled as she clutched her bag. She was leaving everything behind. Her entire life, gone. She turned to glance out the window, and her blood ran cold. A black SUV was following the cab. Jackson knew. He was still watching. Her phone buzzed in her lap. She forced herself to look. Unknown number, run all you want. I'll always find you. Her breath hitched. She was never getting away from him. The cab pulled into the station, the old neon sign flickering above. Marissa threw a wad of cash at the driver and bolted inside, head low, heart pounding. She needed a ticket out of the city. She approached the counter. Next bus leaving. I don't care where. The man behind the counter barely looked up. Cash or card? Cash, she whispered, sliding the bills across the counter. The man took it, printed her a ticket, and pushed it back toward her. Bus 47. Leaving in 20 minutes. Marissa clutched the ticket, moving toward the benches. She could still feel it, the weight of Jackson's eyes. Her head jerked toward the window. The black SUV was still there, parked across the street. She turned away, gripping her bag. She couldn't think about it. The minutes dragged by, slow and suffocating. Then the overhead speaker crackled. Attention passengers, bus 47 has been canceled. We apologize for the inconvenience. Marissa's heart stopped. She shot to her feet. No, that wasn't possible. She turned back toward the counter. The man behind it was already staring at her. Her stomach twisted. Jackson had done this. She spun toward the exit, moving fast. A figure stepped in front of her. Tall, familiar, waiting. Her lungs seized. Jackson, standing there, calm, unshaken. She stumbled back, her breath ragged. You. A slow smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. You didn't really think you could run, did you? He murmured. Marissa's body locked up. Jackson took a step closer, voice low. It's over. She couldn't breathe. She had walked right into his trap. Marissa's entire body locked up as Jackson took a slow step closer. The air in the bus station felt thick, suffocating. Her pulse pounded, her mind screaming at her to run, but her feet stayed frozen to the floor. Jackson didn't raise his voice. You didn't have to. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he said, his tone calm, almost amused. Marissa's breath hitched. You can't do this. His lips twitched in a smirk. Do what? She clenched her fists. You've taken everything. You got your revenge, just leave me alone. Jackson let out a low chuckle. Oh, Marissa. You still don't get it. His eyes were different now. Not the soft, patient gaze she once knew. This was something colder. Smarter. He took another step forward, closing the distance between them. You didn't just cheat, he murmured. You didn't just lie. His voice dropped, sending a shiver down her spine. You made me a fool. Marissa flinched. And I let you, Jackson continued, his tone controlled but deadly. I let you laugh at me. Let you think you could have it all. That you could lie to my face and walk away untouched. His voice sharpened. But no one walks away untouched. Her throat tightened. Jackson, please? He tilted his head slightly, studying her. Are you begging me? A lump formed in her throat. She was, and she hated herself for it. Jackson sighed, shaking his head. I almost feel bad. But then I remember, his voice dipped lower. You never even noticed when I stopped sleeping next to you. Her breath hitched. You knew. You always knew. The realization made her stomach drop. She had thought Jackson was just a quiet, predictable man. She had never seen the version of him standing before her now. He leaned in just slightly. You're mine, Marissa. Not because I love you. Not because I want you back. His voice was velvet and razor blades. You're mine because you owe me. A car door slammed outside. Marissa barely had time to react before two men in suits approached. Ma'am? One of them held out a badge. You need to come with us. Her blood turned ice cold. FBI. Her legs buckled as Jackson stepped back, slipping effortlessly into the crowd. And just like that, she was trapped again. Marissa sat in the cold interrogation room, hands clenched in her lap. Her head was spinning. The agents had pulled her from the bus station, given her a vague explanation about pending financial crimes, and now she was sitting in a metal chair, waiting for them to ruin what little she had left. The door opened. A man in a crisp suit walked in, setting a file down on the table. Agent Carter. He slid into the chair across from her, flipping open the file. "Marissa Lively," he murmured, scanning the documents. "You've had quite the week." She forced herself to stay calm. "I don't know what's going on." Carter raised an eyebrow. "You don't?" He pushed a printed bank statement toward her. "Because this says you embezzled over $2 million. Her stomach flipped. "This isn't mine," she whispered. Carter didn't blink. "It's in your name." Her fingers trembled as she pushed the document back. "Someone framed me." He sighed, sitting back in his chair. "That's convenient." Marissa's nails dug into her palms. "Jackson did this. He set her up." "You don't understand," she blurted. "My husband, ex-husband, he's doing this. He's trying to ruin me." Carter raised a skeptical brow. "Jackson Lively? The same man who voluntarily handed over his financial records to us." Her pulse stopped. "What?" The agent slid another folder toward her. "Jackson reported his suspicions about your financial activity weeks ago." Marissa's stomach dropped. Weeks ago. Jackson had set her up before she even knew he was leaving. Carter leaned forward. "If you didn't do this, prove it." She clenched her jaw. "How?" His expression remained unreadable. "Give us something bigger." A shiver ran down her spine. The room felt smaller. The walls were closing in. Marissa realized with chilling clarity, Jackson had planned for this too. Marissa sat in silence, her mind racing. The FBI thought she was guilty. Jackson had fed them evidence. And now Carter was offering her a deal. "I need a name," he said. Marissa's mouth was dry. I don't have one." Carter sighed. "Then you have a problem." She swallowed hard. "You think I'd betray someone just to save myself?" Carter smirked. "You don't have to. Your friends already did." He flipped open a file. A photo of Liam. Marissa's blood ran cold. Carter tapped the image. "Your boyfriend cut a deal. He's claiming you orchestrated the fraud and he was just a pawn." She couldn't breathe. "Liam?" Her voice shook. "Liam's lying." Carter tilted his head. Maybe not." He folded his hands on the table. "But the thing is, Marissa, you don't have time to figure that out." Her throat closed. This was a setup. Jackson had turned Liam against her. Liam was saving himself. And now she had to do the same. Carter's voice softened. "Help us, Marissa." Her nails dug into her palms. She had nothing left. Nowhere to go. No one to trust. Except. Her gaze sharpened. There was one person left. One person who could destroy Jackson. Her voice came out hoarse. "I have a name." Carter leaned forward. "Go on." Marissa took a breath. She was done playing defense. Jackson wanted a war? She was about to give him one. The name that changes everything. Marissa exhaled sharply, staring straight at Agent Carter. She had a name. A name that could turn everything against Jackson. She leaned forward. "I want protection first." Carter's eyes narrowed. "This isn't a negotiation." She clenched her fists under the table. She had nothing left to lose. "Jackson Lively isn't just ruining me," she said, her voice low but firm. "He's been planning this for months. He's controlling everything, my money, my name, my entire life." Carter didn't react, but she could tell he was listening. She took a deep breath. "You want a name? I'll give you one. But I need something in return." Carter studied her for a moment before sitting back in his chair. "What do you want?" "Witness protection. A chance to disappear before he does worse." Carter exhaled slowly, considering. "We'll see what we can do." Now, his eyes sharpened. "Who's the name?" Marissa's throat tightened. She leaned in slightly, her pulse pounding. "Wyatt Pierce." For the first time, Carter's expression flickered. Marissa swallowed. Jackson didn't do this alone. Wyatt is the one who helped him cover the paper trails, erase records, forge legal loopholes. He's the one who made sure no one could trace Jackson's steps. Carter's jaw tightened. "And you're sure about this?" Marissa's nails dug into her palms. "I'm sure." A long silence stretched between them. Then Carter stood. "We'll verify your claim. Until then you stay put." Marissa's pulse roared in her ears. This was it. Her only way out. But as Carter walked out of the room, leaving her alone, a terrifying thought settled in her chest. Jackson always planned 3 steps ahead. What if she had just walked into his next move? The hours dragged on. Marissa sat alone in the interrogation room, her mind racing. Had she done the right thing? Had she really just turned the tables on Jackson? Or had she played into his hands again? The door suddenly swung open. Carter stepped in, his face unreadable. But this time he wasn't alone. Another man followed. Older. Sharper. He exuded authority. FBI director, maybe? Marissa sat up, heart pounding. Carter dropped a thick file onto the table. "Congratulations," he said. "You were telling the truth." Marissa's chest tightened. "What does that mean?" The older man, Agent Reeves according to his badge, spoke for the first time. "Wyatt Pierce is dirty," he said simply. "And now, we're about to make your ex-husband very, very uncomfortable." A slow, trembling breath escaped Marissa's lips. They believed her. She had one foot out. But then Carter's next words sent ice through her veins. "We put a tail on Jackson after your meeting at the bus station." His tone darkened. "He knows we're closing in." Marissa's fingers curled into fists. Jackson knew. And when Jackson knew, he struck first. A chill ran down her spine. He wasn't going to let her walk away. Marissa was escorted out of the FBI office under tight security. She was being placed in protective custody until they could move forward with the case against Jackson and Wyatt. It should have felt like relief. It didn't. Because she knew Jackson wasn't done yet. The black SUV waiting outside confirmed it. Even with agents watching, he still wanted her to know he was there. A wave of nausea rolled through her as she climbed into the back of the unmarked police car. The driver, a young agent named Harris, didn't speak much. She was too drained to ask questions. As they pulled onto the road, her phone vibrated. Her stomach twisted. Unknown number. With shaky hands, she opened the message. "It's not over, Marissa. Not even close." Her breath hitched. Then, another message. A photo. Her heart stopped. It was a live picture of her. Right now. Inside the car. Her blood ran ice cold. Her head whipped toward the window, but the streets were empty. No black SUV. No one visible. But he was there. Watching. Waiting. She squeezed the phone in her hand. She had tried to run. She had tried to fight. She had given the FBI a name. And still, Jackson was always one step ahead. Marissa's grip tightened around the phone as her pulse thundered in her ears. Jackson had taken a photo of her inside a government vehicle. He knew where she was. Agent Harris, who was driving, noticed the panic on her face. Something wrong? Marissa hesitated. If she told them about the message, would it even matter? Jackson had gotten to the FBI once already. She shoved the phone in her lap. No. Just a bad memory. Harris gave her a skeptical glance but didn't push. The car moved through the darkened streets, heading toward a safe house. A place where she'd be hidden until the case against Jackson moved forward. But deep in her gut, she knew. She wasn't safe. The SUV following her had vanished, but Jackson's reach wasn't limited to what she could see. He had ways. They pulled into a quiet neighborhood. A single-story house sat on the corner lot, looking harmless. That was the point. Harris killed the engine. "You'll be staying here until further notice. Don't leave, don't use any personal devices, and don't trust anyone but us." Marissa nodded stiffly. As she stepped inside, a chill crawled down her spine. She wasn't afraid of being trapped in a house. She was afraid Jackson had already been here first. The safe house was simple. Bare furniture, a stocked kitchen, and one bedroom. The windows were boarded from the inside. No Wi-Fi. No television. No outside connection. Marissa sat on the edge of the bed, fingers curled into the sheets. She should have felt safe. But she didn't. Her thoughts spiraled. What if Jackson knew about this place? What if this was part of his game? She shook her head. No, that was paranoia. Except, she had been right about everything else. Her eyes flicked toward the dresser. She walked over and pulled open the drawers. Empty. Then she checked the closet. Empty. Her fingers trailed over the doorframe. Then she froze. There. Near the baseboard. A tiny camera lens. Watching. Her blood turned ice cold. She stepped back, her breath coming in sharp, short bursts. This was his safe house. Her phone buzzed. She didn't want to look. She already knew what it would say. Unknown number. Did you really think I wouldn't know? A cold shudder ran through her. She wasn't hiding from Jackson. She was exactly where he wanted her. Marissa's mind raced. She had to get out. She lunged for the door, locked. Her breath hitched. No. No, no, no. She grabbed the landline phone on the counter, dialing the emergency contact number Agent Harris had given her. The line was dead. A hollow fear clawed up her throat. This wasn't just Jackson tracking her. He had already taken control. The front door handle rattled. She went completely still. A single knock. Then a voice, calm, collected. I told you, Marissa. You were never going to win. Jackson. He was here. Her lungs seized. She turned to the window trying to break it, but there were metal bars on the outside. The walls were closing in. Jackson's voice was closer now, right on the other side of the door. You took your shot, he murmured. And it was cute. Giving the FBI my name. Playing the victim. Marissa's breath shook. A soft chuckle. But this is where it ends. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Marissa barely had time to react before Jackson stepped inside, smirking. Calm. Controlled. Like he had already won. Marissa stumbled back, her breath ragged as Jackson stepped into the room. The door clicked shut behind him. No gun. No threats. Just him standing there like a man who already owned everything. Her back hit the wall. How did you? Her voice cracked. Jackson smirked. Marissa, you never really left me. Her pulse pounded. The FBI. I let them have their moment, he said calmly. Gave them a name. Wyatt's name. Her stomach plummeted. Jackson shook his head. You think I needed Wyatt? He took a slow step forward. I had a backup plan before you even thought about running. Her lips parted. Jackson exhaled, almost disappointed. You really thought you could beat me? Marissa gritted her teeth. You set me up. Jackson tilted his head. You set yourself up. I just let it happen. Her fingers twitched. She needed a way out. A weapon. A window. Something. But he had planned for everything. Jackson leaned closer. His voice was a whisper now. You ruined my life first, Marissa. His tone dropped, sharp. Now, I'm just making sure you understand what that feels like. Marissa's nails dug into her palms. Jackson was playing her. Still playing her. He wasn't here to kill her. He wanted her to break. You think I'll beg? She hissed, her voice shaking. Think I'll just let you ruin me? Jackson's lips twitched. You already let me. Marissa's jaw clenched. He walked to the dresser, pulling open a drawer. Inside. Her passport. Her money. The things she thought were gone. He tossed them onto the bed. Marissa stared. You wanted to run, Jackson murmured. Here's your chance. She didn't move. Her mind screamed. This was a trick. It had to be. Jackson sat on the edge of the bed, watching her. All you have to do is walk out that door. Marissa swallowed hard. Her hands trembled. What? Why was he doing this? Jackson leaned forward. You know why you won't? Her heartbeat slammed. He smiled. Because you don't want to run. Her stomach twisted. His voice dropped lower. You want to fight. Marissa didn't move. Jackson was baiting her. He had won. Completely. But he wasn't ending it. He wanted something else. Her jaw locked. What do you want from me? Jackson exhaled. To watch you figure it out. Her throat tightened. Figure what out? He smiled coldly. Who you really are. Marissa shook her head. No, this wasn't about her. You, she gritted her teeth. You ruined my life, Jackson. You took everything. His gaze sharpened. Did I? Her stomach dropped. Or did I take what I always controlled? His voice was low, dangerous. You weren't paying attention, Marissa. That was always your problem. A lump formed in her throat. Jackson leaned back, calm, unbothered. You have two options, he said. You walk out of here and disappear forever. Or, Marissa's breath shook. Or what? His smirk returned. Or you help me finish what I started. Marissa's mind spun. Help you? She whispered. With what? Jackson's eyes darkened. Wyatt. The FBI. The loose ends. Her stomach twisted. He wanted her to turn completely. You framed me, she snapped. You made me a criminal. Jackson's lips curled. No, sweetheart. He leaned in. I made you untouchable. Her breath caught. Jackson never acted without purpose. If he was offering this, it meant he saw her as an asset. She hated him. But God help her, she understood him now. She had spent so much time running. So much time losing. Maybe it was time to stop losing. Her fingers curled. Her heartbeat slowed. And then, in a voice that barely felt like hers, she spoke. Tell me what you need. I hope you all have subscribed by now. And don't forget to leave your lovely and positive comments. Let me know how you found the story and which part you liked the most. Looking forward to your feedback. The air inside the safe house felt suffocating. Jackson's eyes stayed locked on Marissa, waiting, watching, like a predator testing its prey. She had spent weeks running, fighting, losing. And now she was sitting across from the man who had orchestrated her destruction. And he was offering her a way out. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she swallowed back the nausea rising in her throat. You want me to help you? Jackson leaned back against the dresser, arms crossed. That depends. Do you want to win? The way he said it sent a shiver down her spine. She had spent her life thinking Jackson was passive, predictable, safe. But this man in front of her? There was nothing safe about him. He had spent months planning her downfall, setting traps before she even knew the game had started. And yet, he wasn't done. What happens if I say no? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jackson's smirk was slow, deliberate. Then you disappear. Her stomach twisted. You'd let me walk away? His gaze darkened. You already know the answer to that. Marissa's fingers curled into her lap. This was another game. A deeper one. He was testing her. Seeing if she would break. But she had already lost everything. And if Jackson wanted her to beg, to crawl, he was about to be disappointed. She lifted her chin, forcing her voice to steady. Tell me what you need. Jackson's lips curved. That was all he had been waiting for. Jackson moved smoothly, pulling a chair out and sinking into it, like they were negotiating a business deal instead of standing inside the wreckage of her life. Marissa refused to shift under his stare. He had won every battle so far. If she had to step into the fire to get her life back, so be it. Jackson steepled his fingers together, exhaling. Wyatt was sloppy. The FBI already has him in their sights. Marissa's pulse ticked faster. He wasn't worried about Wyatt. He was worried about himself. You're telling me you didn't account for that? She asked. Jackson's mouth twitched, something sharp and amused flashing in his eyes. I accounted for everything. But I didn't expect you to throw my name into the fire so soon. Marissa's stomach twisted. She had tried to outmaneuver him. And she had failed. Jackson leaned forward, voice smooth. But that means you're already useful to me. Her heart pounded. What do you need me to do? Jackson's gaze flickered, like he was enjoying this, enjoying watching her make the turn. We need to shift the heat, he said simply. Marissa's brow furrowed. Onto who? Jackson's smirk deepened. She already knew the answer. Marissa's hands gripped the arms of the chair, nails digging into the worn wood. Liam. Jackson gave a slow nod. Liam. Marissa swallowed. He's already gone. I don't even know where he is. Jackson's lips pressed into a smirk. That's where you come in. Marissa's stomach twisted. Jackson had erased her finances, her identity, and even the truth. Now he wanted her to help erase someone else. Liam made himself a liability, Jackson continued. The FBI needs a fall guy. If we give them one, they stop chasing me. Marissa's mind raced. Liam had thrown her under the bus the second things went sideways. He had left her to rot. But framing him? She wasn't like Jackson. She wasn't a monster. Jackson's gaze darkened. You're thinking too hard. Marissa gritted her teeth. I'm thinking like a human being. A flicker of amusement passed through his face. And look where that got you. Her fingers curled tighter. He wasn't wrong. He leaned back, watching her closely. You can keep losing. Or you can get your life back. Her chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. Jackson was ruthless, manipulative, but he never lied. And the truth was she had no life left to hold on to. If she didn't play the game, she was done. Slowly, her nails released from the chair. She met his gaze. What's the plan? Jackson smiled. She had just made her choice. Jackson didn't waste time. Within an hour, Marissa had been briefed. Liam was in Miami. He had checked into a hotel under an alias, but Jackson had found him anyway. Marissa didn't bother asking how. Jackson had his ways. Now it was her turn. She stared at her phone, thumb hovering over the screen. All she had to do was send one message. One message that would make Liam run right into the trap. Jackson watched from across the room, relaxed, patient. You hesitate now and you lose, he murmured. Marissa inhaled sharply. Her thumb tapped the screen. Marissa. Liam, I need help. Jackson is coming after me. I have something that can bring him down, but I need a safe place first. Please. Jackson's expression didn't change. Good. Now we wait. Marissa clenched the phone in her hands. This was it. Liam would come for her. And when he did, the trap would close. Marissa sat stiffly on the couch, gripping her phone like a lifeline. The message was sent. Now she waited. Jackson sat across from her, composed, calculating as if he already knew the outcome. Her pulse ticked in her throat. Would Liam take the bait? The minutes crawled by. Then her phone buzzed. Her breath caught. Jackson's smirk was slow. Told you. She forced herself to read the message. Liam, where are you? A lump formed in her throat. Jackson leaned forward. He's desperate. That's good. Her hands trembled slightly. She was setting Liam up. Liam had betrayed her. He had thrown her to the FBI. He had walked away without a second thought. And yet, this felt different. Jackson must have sensed her hesitation because his voice dipped lower. This isn't about morality, Marissa. This is about survival. She forced herself to breathe. Jackson was right. She had spent weeks losing. Now, she was taking back control. Her fingers moved over the keyboard. Marissa, I can't talk on the phone. It's not safe. Meet me in person. Liam's response came immediately. Liam, where? Marissa turned to Jackson. This was his game. His lips twitched. Tell him the abandoned lot off Lincoln Street. We'll handle the rest. Her stomach coiled. Jackson wasn't just outmaneuvering Liam. He was erasing him. The next hour passed in silence. Marissa sat by the window, watching the dark sky bleed into the horizon. Jackson had called his contacts. Everything was ready. Her body was tense, mind racing. Liam was walking straight into a trap. And she was the one who had led him there. Her phone buzzed. Liam, I'm here. Where are you? Marissa's breath hitched. She turned to Jackson. He's there. Jackson didn't react. He simply stood, rolling his sleeves up. Then let's not keep him waiting. Something in his tone sent a shiver through her. Jackson wasn't acting out of rage or revenge. This was methodical, precise, and she was a part of it now. They slipped into the black car parked outside, and within minutes they were driving toward the abandoned lot. Marissa's nails dug into her palms. She had done terrible things before. Lying, cheating, manipulating. But this was something else. The lot came into view. A single street lamp flickered. And in the center, Liam, standing alone, waiting. Jackson slowed the car to a stop. He turned to Marissa, his expression unreadable. Stay here. Her breath caught. Jackson. He was already stepping out. Marissa's heart pounded as she watched him walk toward Liam. And for the first time she realized, Jackson wasn't just here to set Liam up. He was here to end him. Marissa's pulse roared in her ears. Through the windshield, she watched as Jackson approached Liam, calm, unbothered. Liam turned, his body tense. He knew something was wrong. Where's Marissa? He demanded. Jackson tilted his head. Did you really think she'd come alone? Liam's jaw clenched. I came here to help her. Jackson chuckled, low and cold. No, you came here to save yourself. Liam took a step back. Jackson didn't move. Didn't need to. His presence was enough to suffocate the air between them. You were sloppy, Jackson continued. You panicked. You threw Marissa under the bus and ran. Liam's face twisted. You're one to talk. You framed her for fraud. Jackson shrugged. And yet she's still standing here. You, on the other hand? Liam swallowed. He knew that whatever happened next, he wouldn't walk away from it. Marissa's fingers tightened around the car door handle. She had wanted revenge. She had wanted Liam to pay. But now that it was happening, she felt something new. Something terrifying. Because Jackson wasn't just eliminating a loose end. He was enjoying it. And for the first time, Marissa realized. She had stepped into something far more dangerous than she ever imagined. Marissa sat frozen in the car, her nails digging into her palms as she watched Jackson and Liam in the middle of the abandoned lot. The streetlight flickered, casting sharp shadows over Jackson's figure as he stood perfectly still, waiting for Liam to break. Liam's hands balled into fists. "What do you want, Jackson?" Jackson gave a slow, almost lazy shrug. "I already have everything I want." Liam's jaw tightened. He knew he was trapped. Marissa's stomach twisted. Jackson wasn't just here to scare Liam. He was here to make him disappear. She had gone along with this plan, setting up Liam, baiting him into the trap, because she had no other choice. But now she wasn't so sure. She watched Jackson tilt his head, studying Liam like a predator sizing up weak prey. "You should have stayed gone," Jackson murmured. "But instead you ran to the first distraction you could find. Did you think Marissa actually needed you?" Liam's body stiffened. "She did." Jackson's lips twitched. "No, Liam. She needed an exit strategy. And look where that got her." Marissa couldn't breathe. Jackson was saying all of this for her to hear. He wanted her to understand something. That in his world, survival wasn't about loyalty. It was about who struck first. A slow realization slithered down her spine. Jackson had never once asked her to trust him, because he knew trust didn't exist. Not in the world he was dragging her into. Liam exhaled sharply, shifting his weight. "So what now?" His voice was edged with forced calm. "Are you going to kill me?" Marissa's fingers clenched around the door handle. He was testing Jackson. Jackson smirked. "You're not worth that much effort." Liam's nostrils flared. "Then let me walk away." Jackson's smirk faded. "That's not how this works," he said, voice cold. A flicker of panic crossed Liam's face. For the first time he realized there was no deal to be made. Marissa's heart pounded. She had wanted revenge, but this? Jackson was toying with him. Liam swallowed. "You're making a mistake." Jackson exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "No, Liam. You made the mistake." And then he pulled out his phone. Marissa's stomach flipped as Jackson tapped the screen, holding it up for Liam to see. A bank transfer. Millions of dollars. Liam's eyes widened. "What the hell is that?" Jackson's smirk returned. "Your name on an offshore account. The one that will make sure the FBI stops looking at Marissa and turns their eyes on you instead." Liam's face drained of color. "You set me up." Jackson didn't blink. "You set yourself up the second you ran." Liam staggered back. This is insane. You're framing me for something I didn't do." Jackson's voice was calm. "Welcome to the club." Marissa's breath hitched. Jackson was flipping the entire game. And this was the final move. Marissa's pulse pounded in her ears. Liam was trapped. Jackson had planted the evidence, built the perfect lie, and sealed Liam's fate. But now, it was her turn to make a choice. Liam's panicked eyes flicked to her. "Marissa, don't do this." She swallowed hard. Jackson's gaze slid to her, patient. "Waiting." Liam shook his head. "He's using you. He'll ruin you next." Marissa's breath shook. Would he? Jackson never lied to her. Never promised her safety. But he had always given her a choice. And that was the difference. Jackson spoke, his voice silky smooth. "You don't owe him anything, Marissa." Liam's face twisted. "Don't let him turn you into something you're not." Her hands trembled. She wasn't the same person she had been before. She had been cheated on, manipulated, destroyed. And now, she wasn't just surviving. She was learning. Marissa lifted her chin and turned to Jackson. "What do you need me to do?" Liam's breath hitched. "Marissa, don't." Jackson smiled. And just like that, she had chosen her side. Jackson didn't waste a second. With one tap of his phone, the trap closed. Within minutes, flashing lights illuminated the lot. Sirens screamed in the distance. Liam's face twisted in horror. "No, no." Jackson smirked. "Looks like the FBI found their real suspect." Liam's hands balled into fists. "You set me up." Jackson shrugged. "You should be used to that by now." Liam turned to Marissa, desperate. "You don't have to do this." She stared at him. Liam had abandoned her. Liam had betrayed her. And now he wanted her to save him? Her lips parted and her voice came out calm. "Goodbye, Liam." Liam's face twisted in disbelief. And then, the sirens got closer. Jackson grabbed her wrist, pulling her back. Time to go. Marissa's chest rose and fell in sharp breaths. She had done it. She had let Jackson win. And she hadn't just watched Liam fall. She had pushed him. She had chosen power over morality. And now, there was no turning back. The black SUV sped down the empty highway, the city lights shrinking in the distance. Marissa sat in the passenger seat, silent, unreadable. Jackson drove effortlessly, one hand on the wheel, his other resting lazily on the armrest. Composed. Confident. Like a man who had just eliminated another obstacle. Like a man who had won. She should have felt something, guilt, relief, even fear, but all she felt was a strange, eerie calm. She had sealed Liam's fate. Betrayed him before he could betray her again. And now, she wasn't just Jackson's pawn anymore. She was his equal. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. You were hesitant. Marissa's fingers curled in her lap. Not anymore. His lips twitched. Good. The weight of the night settled in her chest. The old Marissa, the woman who lied, cheated, and thought she was in control, was gone. Jackson had burned her down to nothing. And now she was something else. She turned toward him, her voice quiet but steady. What's next? Jackson's smirk deepened. You tell me. They pulled into a high-rise parking garage. Jackson led her through a back entrance, past a silent security guard who barely looked at them. Marissa didn't ask where they were going. She knew Jackson was testing her. Inside, the penthouse was sleek, modern, but cold. It felt untouched, like it wasn't really lived in. Jackson poured himself a drink, watching her over the rim of his glass. You did well tonight, he said. Marissa exhaled. I did what I had to. He tilted his head slightly. Did you? Her stomach tightened. Was he still trying to push her? She squared her shoulders. Liam deserved what he got. Jackson nodded slowly, swirling the liquid in his glass. And if I told you there's more work to do? Marissa's pulse ticked faster. This wasn't over. Jackson wasn't a man who simply eliminated threats. He eliminated possibilities. You still think this ends with Liam? He mused. The FBI will dig. They'll push. And Wyatt. His voice turned sharper. Wyatt still breathes. Marissa clenched her jaw. This was it. The final test. Was she willing to go all the way? Jackson leaned in slightly, his voice a whisper against the charged air. If you want a life with me, Marissa, there's one last thing to do. Her throat was dry. What? His next word sent a shiver down her spine. We bury Wyatt before he buries us. Marissa stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring at the city spread below. Her pulse thrummed in her ears. Jackson was asking her to cross the final line. She had played his game. She had followed his rules. She had survived every test. But now she wasn't just cleaning up loose ends. She was about to eliminate someone. Her mind whispered doubts. There was still a way out. But her heart? Her heart had already decided. Jackson stepped behind her, his presence like a shadow wrapping around her. His voice was low. If we take Wyatt out, there's no one left to challenge us. Not him. She turned, meeting his gaze. You're giving me a choice? She asked, voice calm. Jackson's smirk was sharp. I don't have to. A slow breath filled her lungs. Jackson had dragged her to the edge. But she was the one stepping forward. She picked up the burner phone he had left on the table. Her first real order. She dialed the number Jackson had already prepared. When the man on the other end answered, she only said 3 words. Wyatt Pierce. Handle it. A long silence. Then the man responded. Understood. She hung up. Jackson's smirk deepened. Marissa set the phone down and turned toward him. And for the first time she wasn't afraid anymore. She had become something else. His partner. His equal. The real game started now. The moment Marissa set the phone down, everything shifted. She felt it in the air. In the way Jackson's smirk was smaller this time, like he wasn't just satisfied, he was impressed. She had just ordered a hit on Wyatt Pierce. And there was no going back. Jackson poured another drink, handing one to her. She took it, fingers steady, even as her mind raced. Wyatt was dangerous, but Jackson had made it clear. This was about control. As long as Wyatt was alive, he was a loose end. And Jackson? Jackson didn't do loose ends. Jackson raised his glass slightly. To new beginnings. Marissa held his gaze. To a new version of herself. She clinked her glass against his and took a slow sip. Jackson studied her as if reading the thoughts in her head. Do you regret it? She exhaled. No. A satisfied smirk curled his lips. Good. Because now there was no difference between them. Marissa had expected silence. She had expected a clean hit. An easy disappearance. But the next day everything changed. Jackson was on the phone when he froze. His expression, always calm, always controlled, tightened. Marissa's stomach twisted. Something was wrong. He ended the call and turned to her, eyes darker than she'd ever seen them. We have a problem. A lump formed in her throat. Wyatt. Jackson's jaw clenched. He saw it coming. Her breath hitched. What does that mean? Jackson exhaled, tossing his phone onto the table. It means Wyatt disappeared. Before we could get to him. Marissa's hands turned ice cold. Wyatt was a threat. A strategist. If he was on the run, it meant he was planning something. Jackson ran a hand down his face. We underestimated him. Marissa's mind raced. They had won every game, outmaneuvered every enemy, but Wyatt wasn't dead. Which meant he was coming for them next. The message came that night. A single text. Unknown number, nice try. Marissa stared at it, blood turning to ice. Jackson was reading over her shoulder, his expression unreadable. She exhaled. He's taunting us. Jackson's lips pressed together. No. He's preparing. Her stomach twisted. Jackson always planned 3 steps ahead. But this time? So had Wyatt. Another message came through. Unknown number. You should sleep with one eye open. A slow chill crept down Marissa's spine. Jackson grabbed his phone and dialed the number. A few seconds passed. Then his contact picked up. Find Wyatt, Jackson ordered, his voice dangerously low. And when you do, make sure he never resurfaces. Marissa swallowed hard. Wyatt wasn't running. He was hunting. And now, for the first time, Jackson and Marissa were the ones being chased. The air was thick with tension, the weight of everything leading to this moment pressing down on Marissa like a vice. Jackson's contact was already in motion, hunting for Wyatt, but they both knew the truth. Wyatt wasn't hiding. He was circling. The predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Marissa sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the city skyline. Jackson leaned against the doorframe, watching her. You're thinking too much. She exhaled. Aren't you? He smirked. No. I already know how this ends. Marissa turned toward him, searching his face. And how's that? Jackson's gaze was sharp, unwavering. With us winning. Her pulse thrummed. Did she believe him? She had once thought she knew Jackson, that he was predictable, safe. But that man was long gone. The Jackson standing in front of her now was a ghost of the past. A man rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. And now she was standing right beside him. Her fingers curled into her lap. She wasn't afraid anymore. Wyatt had made his move. But they were still standing. Jackson stepped forward, slipping a knife onto the bedside table. A silent message. The game wasn't over. And the next time Wyatt came for them, they'd be ready. A slow smirk tugged at Marissa's lips. She wasn't the prey anymore. She had learned from Jackson. And now, she was ready to win. What a journey. Now I have a question for you. Where are you watching my video from? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget, like, subscribe, and share this story if you want more thrilling content. I'll see you in the next story. Until then, take care and stay sharp.